What do people around the state think should be the biggest priority in Lansing? That's coming up for you tonight. Plus, using rainy day funds for Detroit and the trouble with Congressman John Conyers' re-election bid. It's analysis of stories making news across the state. MiWeek starts right now.
Recently, Michigan's economy has begun to turn around. Michigan's gained over 250,000 new jobs. We've paid off $20 billion in long-term debt. And our population is increasing for the first time in a decade. But to make Michigan a top 10 state, there's still plenty of work to be done. Step up and help put Michigan on top. Learn what you can do at MichiganTurnaroundPlan.com.
Funding is also provided by Delta.
Hi, and welcome to MiWeek. I'm Christy McDonald. Thanks so much for joining us. Here's a question for you. What's on your agenda for the state of Michigan? Where should we be spending money? What should be the biggest priority? A new report out this week gives us a good idea of what people around the state are thinking. How this study may influence what lawmakers do next, that is coming up tonight. Plus, the amount of money for roads keeps growing in Lansing. A look at the new proposal and what it could mean for where you drive. Also coming up tonight, money for Detroit. The amount and where it's coming from may be changing. And the trouble with Congressman John Conyers' re-election bid. We will talk about it all. But first tonight, a look at what Michigan citizens really want lawmakers in Lansing to do. The report is the result of town hall meetings across the state.
The Center for Michigan, a nonprofit, nonpartisan think tank, spent the last 7 months traveling the state, asking people what issues they wanted addressed in Lansing. Over 5,500 people participated in 166 community conversations, 2 large sample polls, and an online version of the conversation. The result? A comprehensive report, a to-do list of the most important issues people in the state want tackled. The conversation started with an overview, 3 questions to gauge the feeling or mood of the people in the state. When asked, how do you feel about Michigan now? 60% say good or great. The report found people believe the state is moving in the right direction. About half of those participating in conversations and 40% polled say, compared to 4 years ago, Michigan is slightly or much better. The center found 4 main points: roads, K-12 education, making college affordable, and ending poverty as the biggest concerns for people across the state. Fixing Michigan's roads is at the top of the list. This report found investing in roads, bridges, and the state's infrastructure is important. And perhaps more surprising, those who participated in the conversations and polls said they would be willing to pay more to do it. Another issue important to people statewide: education. The report found voters want to see more job training, improvements in K-12 student performance, as well as an increase in high school graduation rates. Another piece of the education puzzle: making college more affordable. The final major takeaway from this report reflects a real quality of life issue: poverty. And the report found this is a concern shared by those living in poverty and those who don't.
And the center's report will go to everyone who holds office now and all of the candidates running for state office as well. This is where we start tonight. Nolan Finley from the Detroit News is here, along with Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press. And also joining us to talk about the report tonight is John Bebo. He is the president and CEO of the Center for Michigan. Gentlemen, John, it's good to have you back here on MiWeek.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
This has been a long project for you this year. So why don't you go ahead, before we even start talking about more in-depth the results of what the study found, talk to us about why the center feels it's so important to even do something like this each year.
In this age, you got to have ways to make citizenship convenient, and that's what we're trying to do: is connect everyday people who talk about lots of policy issues around their kitchen tables and with their friends. Connect them to the leaders in Lansing, and that's what we've been trying to do for almost 8 years. And increasingly, we're able to reach leaders. They're very interested in the results of these campaigns. We've met with a lot of the legislative leadership this week, both campaigns for governor, and we can tell people that these voices do matter. You're going to be heard by the people in power. Can
you give people an idea of how maybe these reports or some of these results, what people have wanted to see, have influenced policy in the past?
Well, I think influence is the right word. I mean, we can't take credit for for any policy improvement. But there have been a number of things over the years that have come out through these Citizens' Voices reports that have come into fruition. One example is the nation's largest expansion of preschool. For several years we heard in our conversations that was a major priority, and the governor took that up and the legislature took that up, and Michigan has been lauded around the country for really solving a significant public policy problem in the past couple of years. Lengthening the school year. We heard people say a few years ago, we're not sure the kids are going to school as much as they used to, and the center looked into that. We did a deep data dive, and sure enough, districts were lopping off weeks from the school calendar. Over the course of a 12-year student career, they were losing up to a year of time, of instructional time. We showed that to the legislature, and the legislature changed that law and steadily moved the calendar back. There are a number of other examples like that, and that's what we try to impress upon citizens who come in. This is not idle chatter. We're not just here to use you and abuse you and get your quotes and head out the door. We're really committed as a nonprofit organization to Citizen Voices are pretty holy for us, and we want to take them to the halls of power and make them matter.
Hey, John, this year roads rose fairly high on your list of concerns. Do you feel that the just absolute dismal condition of the roads has finally jarred people into the reality that they might have to pay more to fix these highways? Yeah,
we pulled a quote out in the report, one of the best quotes of the whole campaign. Somebody said, I'd much rather pay the government a little bit more money to fix my roads than pay the mechanic to fix my alignment every once in a while. So, yeah, I think it is top of mind because it's something we're all facing every day driving down the road. And I think that surprised us because the general tenor on tax issues is a real standoff among the public. A third would like to see taxes raised, a third would like to see taxes cut, and everybody else says let's keep them about where they're at. So on this particular issue of roads, people said, yeah, we're willing to pony up a little bit more to get a real fix here. That really stood out to us, and I think it speaks to the urgency.
One of the things that strikes me out of the report is the disconnect between what people are saying and what we're seeing their elected representatives do or talk about. How do you bridge that gap?
Well, I think roads is an example where maybe there won't be a disconnect. We'll have to see here in the next few weeks. But in other ways, yeah. The issues of education, the one that really stood out as extremely urgent across lots of demographic groups was student performance. As our Bridge magazine has been reporting, we're lagging further behind. We're not getting better, and yet there has been all kinds of activity in Lansing in the past several years, mainly about the adult issues in education. And what the public is saying is, let's get to the kid issues in education here, and let's keep working to improve student performance.
Well, on education, what struck me is that there seems to be a recognition of Michigan citizens that there's a disconnect between both K-12 education and college, a disconnect to the practical economy, that we aren't preparing children, students, for the jobs that exist. We're not preparing them to work and have a successful life.
Yeah, Nolan, we talked about this a little bit earlier. A few years ago, you and others were involved in an effort to raise awareness about college. And I think we're seeing a shift in the public mood on this. People understand that college is important for a lot of people, but there's some frustration among the public about a lack of attention to vocations and trades and
where jobs exist.
Yeah, where jobs exist. And we're sensing, because of the huge urgency over the cost of college, college affordability, we heard all kinds of anxiety about student loan debt rising. We're sensing that there's a growing question in the public about return on investment, which is a different and again troubling kind of concern, like you found a few years ago when you were looking into the
Well, look at all the young people we have coming out of college who can't find work.
Right, and I think that came up a lot. I actually had the opportunity to moderate a couple of these community conversations for the center, and that was very interesting about talking about what jobs are available for them when they do come out of college and they have that tremendous debt. But also I wanted to chime in on the point that people are looking for more vocational programs or programs to bridge from high school, or even those opportunities, those last 2 years that you're in high school, of what is possible after just having a high school diploma. Where can they go from there?
Well, yeah, I think there's a restiveness in the public, a pushback against the notion of academic freedom and come into the college institution and experience and just learn and you'll figure it all out. I think the public is demanding a better sense of customer service and consumer, I don't want to say protection, but consumer awareness on the part of our higher ed institutions, that the responsibility doesn't stop with simply expanding the mind. It also includes informing the mind about what the choices are going to be when you get that.
That should be good news for community colleges, which are set up to do exactly what the public says it wants.
Yeah, you know, the questions you guys had about poverty and the things that people said about poverty, I thought that was very interesting. We don't ask or talk about that issue very much, but I wondered if you guys got any sort of takeaways about what people think we ought to do about it. That always seems to be the missing piece there. No one likes poverty, but how do you
tackle it?
The surprise for us, so we set up about 24 issues to quiz the public on and get their feedback on. And if you had asked me in September when we were hitting the field, you know, did I think poverty was going to be right up there, number 1, 2, 3, I would have said, well, I think people probably think that's a reality, and for some, and others don't think about it.
Right.
Well, so I was pretty shocked by the results that came out. The level of urgent concern about it across the board, whether you're white, black, rich, poor, is pretty consistent. People see it as, yeah, this is a big deal.
Yeah.
What to do about it, I think flummoxes the public. Anecdotally, you hear a lot of the familiar sound bites, hand up, not a handout. Some people talking about return to the earned income tax credit. But I think I really think we're at the dawn of a much bigger policy discussion about how to attack this in new ways.
Yeah.
But they didn't necessarily embrace some of the sort of standard fixes.
Yeah, that's right. And I think you're teeing up the minimum wage question.
Yeah.
You might think that if there's this urgent sense of poverty, that would lead naturally into wide support for increasing the minimum wage. We did not find that. We found support for that to be rather nuanced and fairly split. Overall, there wasn't consistent majority support for it. People in our conversations were somewhat more supportive of it than in our statewide polls. But I think there might possibly be a confusion or a recognition on the part of the public that there might be some trade-offs when you deal with minimum wage issues.
Well, this is a great report, and it's going to be a very interesting tool for lawmakers going forward and to take a look at what people are really thinking. We're going to have a link to it on our website at MiWeek.org if you want to check it out. John Bebo from the Center for Michigan, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
And speaking about that citizens' agenda for roads, lawmakers seem to be moving on the roads front. A package of bills this week are heading to the full House that would put $400 million toward road repairs. And some funds from sales and use taxes will go instead to roads. And as part of that package, there will be bigger fines for overweight trucks. So are we finally moving in the right direction in terms of tackling the larger road issue?
We're moving slowly in the right direction, incrementally in the right direction. This is hardly the comprehensive fix that's needed for these roads. It's not nearly enough money. At minimum, we probably need $1 billion, $1.2 billion, maybe $1.5 billion a year just to get these roads where they need to be and then to sustain them. This is better than nothing, I guess, because it is a sort of annual funding source rather than just at the whims of the surplus, but it's not nearly enough money.
But it feels like that we've moved farther a lot faster than we would have at the beginning of the year when we started talking about funding for roads.
Well, but remember, this is the third year or the second year that we've had this conversation? I mean, the governor has had this on his agenda and high on his agenda for a long time, and the legislature has not really responded. So, you know, we're late even coming to this point, and it is just an incremental point down the road. I mean, it's money, it's real money, but it's nowhere near the tab that we all know exists to fix the roads and then to maintain them in a way so that they don't get back into this kind of shape.
We got to pay for these roads. I mean, we've been saying that for years now,
yeah.
but we've neglected these roads for decades. We haven't spent enough money on the roads. We've spent the money poorly. We've tolerated shoddy work. There's been a lot of reasons our roads are in these conditions, but they're in this condition, and it hurts us on a number of fronts. It hurts our competitiveness. It's hard on our vehicles. How many, you busted a tire this year, and it's happening over and over again, and they're not going to get fixed unless we pay to fix them.
How much of a difference is going to make in terms of raising revenue when you do have an increased fine on an overweight truck? But don't you then have to step up the surveillance of those and the enforcement of that?
Yeah, you have to enforce it, and it's not, again, it's not enough. The overweight issue is more than just a revenue issue. That's also a use issue on the roads, and you've got to build the roads differently if you're going to allow weights as high as we allow them. I mean, we say this all the time, but go to other states. It's not like the trucks are loading up at the Michigan border, and putting more into their loads to cross that line. They're going through other states too, and they're not having the same effect
That's right.
on their roads as they are on ours. There's something we're not doing that would preserve the roads a little better.
I drove in from Ohio to Michigan on 75 the other day, and just as soon as you cross that border, it's bam, bam, bam. It's awful.
When we talk about the funding, in the last week or so, the whole "how about we have toll roads in Michigan" conversation has started again. I don't feel that that's going to get much traction, but it's always interesting to talk about. People kind of recoil and say, "Oh, you're not going to charge us to drive on these roads."
Well, it's a little tougher in Michigan because we don't have as much through traffic, so you're charging.
We're taxing ourselves
like
to drive
Pennsylvania,
over and over and over again.
All the money comes from us, So, and also, you're going to really have the nerve to charge people to drive on the roads given the condition they're in? I mean, it's different if you build a new road and it's nice and it's smooth and it takes you someplace, saves you a little time, what have you. But you're not going to pay to drive on 94, for example, or 70.
All right, last word on roads, Stephen.
Yeah, I mean, I think toll roads are something we do need to look at least. I mean, 75 going north and the way, whichever way you go to the Blue Water Bridge, 94 or 69 or these other places. I mean, there are places that are through roads, and we should maybe think about charging for those. Almost
or
every
just
other,
on interstate trucks, a toll
on trucks, right?
There's a couple of creative options that.
But use fees are the way to go with this, right? It's the people who are using the roads in the way that they're using them who ought to have to pay for them. So that's the right direction.
All right, let's talk about what else they are deciding in Lansing right now. Talk this week that the $350 million over 20 years for Detroit could actually be a lump sum of less than $200 million straight from the rainy day fund. Does that make it easier or harder to sell for lawmakers outstate?
I don't know.
When you're actually taking a lump sum from the rainy day fund.
I don't know anything's going to make it easier. I mean, it's a tough sell for these folks who've got to go into districts and say, look, we know you got troubles too, but we got to do this for Detroit. What's interesting though, we printed a poll in today's newspaper from Business Leaders of Michigan, shows pretty strong support statewide for helping out Detroit. So there is a sense statewide that that benefiting Detroit, helping Detroit out of this mess is good for everybody. And I think that, as much as anything, will move lawmakers in the right direction.
So it doesn't make a difference where this money comes from?
Well, I think it does make a difference where it comes from. I mean, the rainy day fund, I think, is not as good a source as the tobacco settlement money, for instance. I mean, I think.
Why not?
Because we're still building up that rainy day fund, and we blew through it. John Engler, one of the worst things that he did, and he did a lot of good things too, but one of the worst things he did was blow through that rainy day fund before he left office. And Granholm,
that rainy day fund still had a lot of money when he left office.
didn't reverse that, so we ended up with nothing. I mean, when Rick Snyder took office, we didn't have anything really. We've been working on building that back up. It's not where it should be. So anything you take out of it, you're stealing from yourself.
And that's, keeping the rainy day fund fat is a benefit in that it reduces your bond rating, or it helps reduce your bond rating, so you get lower borrowing costs.
Yeah.
I think bonding the money, paying it off through the tobacco settlement money was a decent idea.
Yeah, I think that was a good idea too.
So do you have to have a plan for how to replenish that money back into the rainy day fund if you say, all right, we're going to give X amount of dollars to Detroit, and this is what we're going to do to make sure that that comes back in there over 10
Rainy
years'
day
time?
fund's been being built up out of surpluses that we've had the last 2 or 3 years. There's no reason to expect that those will go away. You can't count on it, obviously, but
It might rain someday.
it might rain someday, and we might need something. But this is also a rainy day fund kind of issue, right? An emergency, one-time kind of thing. That's why you have the money. It's
I don't
not
think-
building cost into
I
the.
disagree that it was ever intended for these sort of one-time bailouts and projects. Rainy day fund is designed to smooth over economic dips in
sure.
revenue
Right.
in the economy,
Right.
so that you don't have to do drastic budget cutting. I think this
both.
sets a bad precedent if we dip into it for this.
I will have to say it does worry me a little bit that now you're going to get other cities and other areas that said, well, I would just need a little bit to just get by
You're
this.
Or let's use the rainy day fund for this project or that project. I mean, you open a door and they're going to be grabbing at it with both
But the
hands.
door's open. I mean, you have all these municipalities who have serious financial issues, and they are not wrong to raise their hands and say, what are
they're
we going to
going
do
to.
about
Yeah.
this?
And they're going to. What happens if Flint files for bankruptcy?
Absolutely.
How much are they going to go in to help Flint or some of these other communities?
All right.
How
Well,
do you say no?
moving on right now, Congressman John Conyers could be on the verge of starting a write-in campaign. We are still waiting to hear from the county clerk's office to see if he has enough valid signatures to be on the ballot. In question are 2 circulators who may not have been registered voters when they collected signatures. A lawsuit was filed this week challenging the requirement of circulators to be registered voters. So we have a couple of things going on here, but we also have the monumental task, what it could be if John Conyers has to do some kind of write-in campaign.
Well, write-in campaign. I mean, ever since Mike Duggan run the write-in campaign, everybody thinks, oh, well, that's a snap. Mike Duggan won it with extraordinary organization,
Yeah.
a lot of money, and just a lot of 24/7 hard work. I don't think, John Conyers is not capable of
doesn't have
doing
that
that
kind of
himself.
organization, no.
He doesn't have that kind of organization nor that kind of money. So is the UAW and others going to do that for him? Do they have the resources? And then, you can't gloss over the fact that John Conyers is not always mentally capable of doing this sort of thing. He's intermittently lucid. He probably should retire anyway. This should probably be a chance for him to go out gracefully. But this is not Mike Duggan.
Well, I'm going to first off ask you about the whole name recognition thing. If you've been in Congress for 26 terms, about 50 years, and you do not have name recognition to win a write-in campaign, I don't understand how that. I don't understand how that's not possible. That people would say, "Oh, John Conyers," and not write it in.
It's not about name recognition. It's about getting people to remember when they walk in the door to write
the
it
write-in.
because his name's not going to be anywhere on that ballot when they
there's
walk in that booth.
There's a lot of teaching that has to go on. It's a different kind of campaign. I spent a lot of time talking with the Duggan folks about how you campaign for a write-in versus how you campaign on the ballot. It's apples and oranges, and you've got to have an organization that understands that difference and understands how to connect that difference in voters' minds so that they do remember to do it. I have no confidence at all that the Conyers organization could do that, but I think if he is off the ballot, it's not just a question of whether he has a write-in campaign. I think we'll see several
But
others.
Steve, I think we keep just missing the bigger issue here is this man capable of serving in Congress? And why aren't the people around him stepping up and say, hey,
No
this is an
question.
opportunity to do the right thing here. He no longer has the mental capacity to serve. Let's at least let him
I
retire
got to ask you,
gracefully.
Nolan, who is saying that he no longer has the mental capacity to serve?
I think anyone who
Anybody around him and everybody
talks with
around
him
him.
sees there's an age issue there. I think you have to balance that though against the respect he's due, given who he is, given the record that he has. I mean, this is the dean of the Black Caucus in Washington. I'm not sure how you broach. I mean, you got to be careful about how you broach that. But there are people close to him who could do it, who are not, and I think shame on them. I think everyone is afraid to go there, and this is not the only person we've seen this with. We have a very old delegation in the state, and there are lots of people who are always weighing when's the time to leave, it becomes very difficult for other people to say.
I think it's a very delicate question, and it's a very delicate issue to tackle. But let me ask you this: does he have the people around him? You say the direct people around him to maybe not launch the kind of campaign that would get him a successful write-in attempt. But are there people in Washington? Are there people going to turn out in terms of sending money this way to kind of build that kind of ground campaign where he could win?
That's a good question, and I don't think that you're going to see that sort of outside support come in. One, because there's no danger of Democrats losing that seat. That seat's going to be a Democrat regardless.
It's drawn in a way that
so
Republicans could never get it.
It's not like, oh my God, if we don't come rushing in here, we're going to have a Republican take that Detroit seat. There's, Horace Sheffield's on the ballot. Everybody doesn't love Horace Sheffield, but he's a Democrat on the ballot. So I don't think you're going to see that rush to save this seat.
Okay, and I know that you had talked about 2 other people could be write-in candidates. More people could be write-in candidates. Should step forward. We've got about 10 seconds left.
I think if Conyers doesn't end up on the ballot, you'll see a number of write-ins emerge. What the question is whether enough money can coalesce behind one of them to end up maybe having a shot.
Well, maybe we'll hear some word later on this week. And that is going to do it for MiWeek. Thanks so much for joining us. Check us out at MiWeek.org. You'll also be able to get a link to the Center for Michigan's full report on the Citizens Agenda. Plus, we're on Facebook. We are on Twitter. Find us there. I'm Christy McDonald. Have a great weekend, and we will see you next Thursday for MiWeek.
Recently, Michigan's economy has begun to turn around. Michigan's gained over 250,000 new jobs. We've paid off $20 billion in long-term debt. And our population is increasing for the first time in a decade. But to make Michigan a top 10 state, there's still plenty of work to be done. Step up and help put Michigan on top. Learn what you can do at MichiganTurnaroundPlan.com.
Funding is also provided by Delta.